Gamecock fans, listen to me carefully. We are currently witnessing a recruiting revolution with South Carolina's football program.
Our Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, your one-stop shop for the latest headlines and potential storylines on South Carolina Gamecock athletics. I'm Andrew Lyon, the host of this podcast, and also a staff writer for Gamecocks Digest over on SI.com. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen or watch here today. We are free and available on YouTube and also wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. South Carolina's football program has had a lot of success on the recruiting trail in the past 13-14 months or so, of course, finishing with a top 16 recruiting class in the 2023 cycle, and they are off to a rocket start once again in the 2024 recruiting cycle. And the thing is, there's a couple of reasons why this is currently taking place, why we're currently seeing a paradigm shift with South Carolina's football recruiting department. And that is the fact that Shane Beamer's culture he's created, combined with the power of social media, is leading to a recruiting revolution in Columbia. Shane Beamer was talking to the media at his weekly press conference on Tuesday afternoon, and he was asked a question from Gene Sapikoff of the Post and Courier regarding South Carolina's recruiting culture and sort of how current commits and signees have been helping to lead the charge on the recruiting front. And when asked a question about just how big of a deal that is, this is what Shane Beamer had to say.
We've got some really good players committed to us right now, and they're trying to actively recruit some really good players to join them as well. So I think that's huge. And I tell our players all the time, like even when we bring in players to our program on recruiting visits, we can show them all this and do all we want as coaches. Our best recruiters are our own players, because as coaches, we can sit here and tell you how great things are and how we treat our players. But if we're full of crap, they're going to be with our players, and our players are going to tell them the truth that these guys are full of it. And so our players are our best recruiters. Same thing with the guys that are committed to us. And I think it's a test, or it's a, just another example of the world's a lot smaller right now with social media. All these kids know each other. A quarterback in Connecticut can develop a really close relationship with an offensive tackle in Dorchester, South Carolina, or whatever it may be. And that wasn't the case 10 years ago or even that long. So they all know each other. They're able to connect. They go to a lot of the same events and things like that. We had a bunch of committed guys that were here last weekend, and it wasn't like I was calling them, telling them, hey, you all need to come this weekend. One of them decided to come last weekend, and then the next thing you know, the whole crew is here, and they're trying to get other people.
So when talking about how this recruiting revolution is unfolding here at South Carolina, we got to start off with the culture that Shane Beamer and his coaching staff have created at South Carolina and how the recruits have sort of responded to it, how it's resonated with them. And the thing is, since Shane Beamer started this job back in December 2020, he has worked tirelessly along with his assistant coaches to build a culture that is a loving family environment that goes well beyond the football field. And what that leads to is a real genuine feeling with prospects and their families that come to visit South Carolina's football program. And also it leads to them being able to hold everybody collectively accountable, because everybody knows that at the end of the day, you are in their corner. You are on their side. And when you're someone like that for a particular person, then what that allows you is it allows you the ability to hold that person accountable and responsible for whatever actions that they execute throughout, any sort of walk of life, whether it be football or, being a lawyer or being a doctor or anything of that sort. And that's what's happening with Shane Beamer and this football program. And again, it's leading to these recruits sort of coming away maybe sometimes a little bit surprised in a positive way, but, just enjoying the visit at South Carolina because they see how the coaches treat them and their families. They see how the players are interacting with one another, both on and off the field. And then you throw in everything else. They see the facilities, they see the academics. They realize that South Carolina is an SEC school, which means it's going to allow them the opportunity to compete against the best athletes in all of college football and help them potentially get developed for the next level at the NFL. And what this has led to over the long haul is multiple national prospects committing to South Carolina. And as time has progressed, and Shane Beamer and his coaching staff, again, have really entrenched the culture that they want here at South Carolina, you're seeing even greater numbers of national prospects who at the very least are becoming intrigued by the idea of possibly playing for South Carolina. And this has sort of led into a new age of recruiting, not just for South Carolina, but the entire sport in terms of social media interactions. Obviously, if you're going to be a serious football coach in today's college football, you have to be someone that is at least savvy with social media. You don't have to be someone that's literally, trying to post a tweet every other hour, but you can't be someone that's completely dormant either. You got to be someone that's got a presence. You got to be able to relate to today's generation of athletes. Shane Beamer already aces that in spades. But the other thing with social media is the fact that they've got current commits and recent signees who on that app and probably other apps as well are tweeting or messaging at other targets for South Carolina's football program and letting them know continuously, hey, South Carolina loves you, the fan base loves you, the coaches love you, we want you here in Columbia. This is home for you. And the best examples in recent months and maybe the past, 6 months or so plus have been Cam Pringle, Mazio Bennett, and Dante Reno. And all three of these guys, they have sort of really led the charge in this effort towards recruiting guys like Josiah Thompson, Blake Franks, and Jonathan Paylor. And there's been some other guys that they've reached out to and been talking with on Twitter. Guys like Kelvin Hunter, Kylan Fox, the tight end, I believe, out of Georgia, 2024 running back Anthony Scuda Carey, 2024 edge defender King Joseph Edwards, amongst plenty of other players. So, with this recruiting revolution, what could all this lead to? Well, it's pretty simple. This culture that Shane Beamer and the staff have created at South Carolina, plus how it's resonated with recruits, commitments, and signees alike, and how recruits are using social media to reach out and continuously interact with other targets of South Carolina's football program, it could lead to some of the best recruiting classes the program has ever seen. They've already gotten off again to a great start in the 2024 recruiting cycle. I believe right now the consensus is they're ranked 6th or 7th nationally. And that's with only, I believe, 4, 5, or 6 commitments currently in the fold. And the Gamecocks are in the race for plenty of other big-time prospects in that manner. And they've also gotten off to a good start in terms of building rapport with guys in the 2025 class and the 2026 class even as well. So the point being, there's no signs of this potentially slowing down. Besides if South Carolina maybe ends up hitting a serious plateau on the football field, maybe they start to actually struggle to continuously progress, which at some point they are not going to always keep going up in the win-loss column, and they will have some adversity in that aspect. But right now, there is a recruiting revolution taking place in Columbia, South Carolina. The national talking heads are just starting to really take note of it, but pretty soon, with the way this is all going in South Carolina's favor, the rest of the SEC is going to find out real quick that Shane Beamer and this staff, they aren't messing around in terms of trying to win championships and bring some hardware to South Carolina. Now, I talked about the great start the Gamecocks have gotten off to in this recruiting class just a couple moments ago, and that they're in the game for playing big-time prospects. And there's one particular prospect that has sort of made some buzz on social media in the past couple of weeks, but not for the reasons that South Carolina fans would potentially like. We're going to dive into what all that means with Dylan Stewart out of the Washington, D.C. area in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NCAA tournaments have now officially reached the Final Four. There's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, if you go make your first bet on FanDuel, you can get up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Essentially, you're guaranteed to get money out of your first bet, whether you hit on your bet or you strike out swinging. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, it's secure, and it's super easy to use. You can bet on everything from the money line to a specific prop bet and even make your own same-game parlay. In terms of South Carolina's matchup with the Iowa Hawkeyes in the Final Four, the Gamecocks have opened up as an 11.5-point favorite for their Final Four showdown on Friday evening. The odds are currently listed at -112 for the Gamecocks to cover that spread. I'll do a deeper dive on whether or not I think they'll cover that spread later on in the week. But what do you think? Don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. All right, so let's continue to talk about South Carolina football recruiting, but let's turn the page over to one specific prospect in edge defender Dawn Stewart, who has become a big-time priority target for Sterling Lucas, Shane Beamer, and this entire Gamecock football coaching staff. But here's the thing. There seems to be a bit more competition now in this recruitment based on what all has happened in the past couple weeks, as there's been a couple expert predictions put in for Dawn Stewart to potentially go elsewhere. Here's the thing. Despite these recent expert predictions that have been put in for 2024 edge prospect Dawn Stewart, I don't think Gamecock fans have any real reason to worry. Now, for context into these expert predictions that I'm referring to, Dawn Stewart is on a college football escapade right now, is the best way to honestly describe it, because he has scheduled 9 visits for 9 different programs this spring, going all the way through the end of May. 2 of them being the Alabama Crimson Tide, which took place back on the weekend of March the 4th, and another one to visit the Ohio State Buckeyes back on March the 24th. And here's the thing. After his visit to Alabama, Crimson Tide insider over from On3, Joseph Hastings, logged an expert prediction for the Tide to land Dawn Stewart. But then, after his visit to Ohio State, just a day or two ago, On3 Director of Recruiting Chad Simmons has now logged in an expert prediction for the Ohio State Buckeyes to land Dawn Stewart. Now, some Gamecock fans, just based on what I just said, are going to be greatly concerned about this. But here's the thing. I don't think that you have to worry about these apparent recent developments with Dawn Stewart's recruitment for 2 reasons, mainly. First of all, how these predictions have come about. Because here's the thing. I'm not going to completely dismiss these 2 insiders, and Joseph Hastings, and especially Chad Simmons of On3, and completely disregard them as basically being some faux pas. I'm not going to do that. But there is a small pattern here that does seem to be formulating, which is, it seems like that based on these first couple visits, Dawn Stewart is loving almost every visit that he is going on. And here's the thing. There's been plenty of prospects, plenty of examples in the past that you can go back and look at where a big-time football prospect like Dawn Stewart went and visited a bunch of solid college football programs and went on a slate of visits over the course of a few weeks or months. And with every single visit, just continuously was just blown away by what all they saw. Dawn Stewart's not the first recruit to potentially be like this in his recruiting process, and he's certainly not going to be the last one. But based on these predictions, that's the vibe that I honestly get here. Now, he could have just genuinely loved his visit to Alabama and Ohio State, and maybe it was enough to put them in the catbird seat. That could be the case as well, but I just find it hard to believe based on how, again, these predictions have come down for Alabama and Ohio State. And the other thing is this. Sometimes you build up a sizable lead for a guy. You get a guy on multiple visits like South Carolina has with Dawn Stewart, and they decide that, hey, look, I've enjoyed visiting y'all's program as much as I have, but I do want to go and check out what some of these other football programs have to offer. And so there's a period of time that passes and they don't go to respective school. And after a certain amount of time, the fans of said school start to get a little bit nervous because they're like, what's going on? We haven't seen this guy on campus in recent weeks. We haven't heard about him in a couple of months. We're hearing that he's having a great time in Columbus. He's having a great time over in Tuscaloosa. Are we going to lose out on this guy? I don't think that there needs to be, again, any real alarm bells going off here just yet with Dylan Stewart's recruitment. And here's the other thing. Going into what Shane Beamer and this coaching staff have done with Dylan Stewart to this point, they have built a rock solid rapport here with the Washington, D.C. native. A reminder, Dylan Stewart has taken 5 visits to South Carolina to this point in the recruiting process based on On3's data. That is 2 more than the second place team, and ironically enough, the Ohio State Buckeyes. And he's going to be visiting South Carolina for a 6th time, I believe, in a couple of weeks, sometime around maybe when South Carolina's spring game ends up taking place. This is also the same prospect that literally stormed the field with fans after South Carolina defeated the Tennessee Volunteers in their final home game of the 2022 football season. Now, obviously, a lot of people just love to have the experience of being able to storm the field and not get in trouble for it. So again, maybe he just wanted to have the feeling of doing that. But this is a 5-star, potential at the time, 5-star recruit that is in tow for a visit at an SEC football program, watching another team that probably has also offered him in Tennessee. And knowing all the people that follow recruiting to a serious degree these days, you could put yourself at risk there if you decide to rush the field and go join the fray. But Dylan Stewart still went out there and did that, and that to me says a lot about how much he loves the atmosphere and environment at South Carolina, regardless of everything else in his recruitment and how it pertains to Shane Beamer and the coaching staff's relationship with him. And speaking of that, he's publicly named the Gamecocks his leader not just once, but twice in this recruitment to this point. So I say all that to say this. I understand that some fans, again, they're going to be worried about some of these other guys discussing that Dylan Stewart might be leaning now more towards another program. Here's the other thing. This recruitment was always going to be a marathon. It wasn't going to be a sprint to the finish line. Now, will Dylan Stewart, wait all the way till the second national signing day, like maybe Nicholas Harbert did, and, have it come all the way down to the final hours before he makes his decision? Probably not. There's a good chance it probably won't end up that way. But either way, this was probably going to happen one way or another with a couple of these programs. And again, South Carolina's going to get him right back on campus in just a couple weeks. And sometimes all it takes is just coming back to the place that you have been most frequently for you to get reminded, oh, this is why I've been here far more than almost every other program in my recruitment, because I do love this place. There is something different in the air here in Columbia, South Carolina. And I think that's going to be the case personally with Dylan Stewart. So again, right now, I don't think there's any cause for concern in spite of what other experts are saying about Dylan Stewart and his recruitment and how it's unfolded in recent weeks. All right, now, turning the page now to South Carolina's women's basketball program. Obviously, the women's basketball team's got a lot going on in terms of the team itself, as they have already arrived in Dallas, Texas, and they are gearing up for what is sure to be a big-time Final Four bout with the Iowa Hawkeyes. And again, I'm going to dive a lot more into that game over the next couple of days heading into Friday night. But there was a big-time signee for South Carolina that took the hardwood on Tuesday night for a different game, the McDonald's High School All-America game. It's a very prestigious All-American game in terms of the sport of basketball, and that signee was Milaysia Fulwiley, who is a South Carolina native. And here's the thing, when going back and seeing some of the highlights from her performance on Tuesday night, Milaysia Fulwiley is going to be an absolute problem at South Carolina. She scored 17 points in the McDonald's All-America game on Tuesday night, and she had plenty of highlight reel moments based on the videos that got posted on social media, and I got a couple for y'all, for those of you specifically that are watching this show on YouTube, that I want to show you real quick. This first one, for those of you listening on audio podcast, basically, Milaysia Fulwiley ran over to sort of the wing side of the floor and took a shot quite literally that was deeper than NBA range, I believe, and pretty close to the logo on the court. So here's a real quick clip showing that shot.
And intensity and joy.
Back into the hands of Fulwiley. Oh, from NBA range! She can't miss!
But of course, Milaysia Fulwiley doesn't just shoot the three ball quite well. She also does a fantastic job of slashing onto the basket and being able to make acrobatic moves with the basketball in her hands in order to have the best chance of seeing it go through the hoop. So here's a little sweet underhand scoop that she had at some point, I believe, later on in the game.
On ESPN. The West in front. Fulwiley against Watkins, adding to her highlight.
Milaysia Fulwiley is apparently 5'6" or 5'7", which some people would probably be a little bit worried about, because maybe they would think that, okay, well, what if there's actually somebody in front of her at the basket? Can she still actually finish through contact and connect on those kind of shot opportunities? Yes, she can.
One at the line.
Brooke, you're my dog.
Thanks, Ted. You're my dog too, boy. Come on.
Oh, nice finish.
Milaysia Fulwiley headed to South Carolina off the tough drive. Well, you think about the great guards at South Carolina, and she is going to.
So obviously, for those of you that just watched all of those video clips, again, Milaysia Fulwiley needs to say she is going to potentially be an offensive superstar here at South Carolina, and she can score the basketball in a variety of ways. And that's the thing, honestly, it's going to be the most interesting thing to watch in terms of how her career trajectory unfolds at South Carolina, because right now, South Carolina's play style, it's pretty obvious what they're trying to do on offense. The offense runs through the front court. The offense runs through the low post. The Gamecocks try to get the ball down low to Aaliyah Boston, Victoria Saxton, Camila Cardoso. Everybody basically that plays in the front court, you are the primary scoring option on the floor. Now, of course, South Carolina has some other talented players at the guard spot, like obviously Isaiah Cook. Of course, you got Bree Beal as well. And there's a couple other guards behind them that could develop into really solid pieces for this team. But in terms of Milaysia Fulwiley's offensive game, there's a lot of talk about, if she's going to be, I don't want to say forced to conform, but I guess that's the best way to say it. If she's going to sort of assimilate to South Carolina's team play style and basically sacrifice some of what she is able to do for the betterment of the team. That is something that's been said a lot about this current squad that Dawn Staley has, and the word sacrifice especially, how multiple players have certain aspects of their game that they could probably showcase a lot more, especially at other schools, but at South Carolina, for the sake of winning basketball games and going through the team's best players, and again, Aaliyah Boston, most of the front court, and a player like Isaiah Cook, they sacrifice all of that. Bree Beal, the all-time leading scorer in Illinois women's basketball at the high school level, came here and has averaged like around 5, 6, 7 points a game her entire career here because she chose to be more of a defensive player and instead help facilitate the offense more than anything else. Milaysia Fulwiley, I feel like, is going to be one of the first players since the 2019 recruiting class got brought in that is going to force Dawn Staley to have to change that a little bit. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's going to all be about Milaysia Fulwiley once she arrives here at South Carolina, but I do think that Dawn Staley is going to be forced to have to run her offense more through the guards with her in the lineup. And think about it. Raven Johnson, fantastic facilitator, someone that's great in transition at the point guard spot. Imagine her and Milaysia Fulwiley running the fast break together. That would be something that would be quite fun to watch. It could also make defenses have to respect your inside-out game once again offensively. That's not to say that they can't do that right now, because again, Zia Cook, Bree Beal, the way that those two play on the outside, they have done a better job this year of really stretching out defenses and preventing them from being able to basically play a sagging zone defense in this paint against South Carolina's offense throughout the course of a 40-minute basketball game. Milaysia Fulwiley could take it to the next level. And that could be dangerous for opponents because obviously, if you're guarding her one-on-one with her ball handling, her shooting ability, and her ability to finish at the rim, she's going to find ways to score. There's a lot of talk about Caitlin Clark at Iowa and how she is able to dominate basically almost every single opponent and always essentially carry Iowa on the offensive end. I'm not going to quite say Milaysia Fulwiley is going to be the next Caitlin Clark, but doggone it, in terms of creating excitement and, again, the variety in her offensive arsenal, I think that she could be the next one that fits sort of the Caitlin Clark mold in women's college basketball. And South Carolina's got her right in their backyard and are about to see her take the floor this next season. So, South Carolina not slowing down anytime soon on the hardwood in women's college basketball. If anything, they're going to get just even more dangerous and more balanced on the offensive end with Milaysia Fulwiley joining the Gamecocks this next fall. But with that being said, y'all, that is going to do it for today's show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I hope that y'all thoroughly enjoyed today's show as always. What are your thoughts on the recruiting revolution that I've termed for South Carolina's football program so far, and how Shane Beamer's culture and how it's resonated with the players has sort of created this recruiting revolution? Let me know your thoughts on that and everything else I discussed on today's show down below in the comments section if you watched today's show on YouTube. But of course, if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast app, you can also hit me up on Twitter at @aline_SC, and I'll try to respond to your message or comment as quickly as I see it. Once again, thank y'all so much for making us your first listen or watch here today. For your second listen or watch, be sure to check out Locked On College Basketball, where experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court. Plus, hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball is available on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts. But with that being said, once again, that does it for me on today's show. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and I will catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.